Can we all agree before I start this video that Dragon Ball Z and Dragon Ball Super aren't meant to make any sense? They aren't series based on logic or even anything worth consistency. So when you really want to debate or talk about this show, you have to go into it with a bit of a grain of salt because it is a show that breaks rules constantly. Now with that said, hi, my name is Chris and welcome to Anime Debate. This week we're going to compare two shows head to head because that's what we do here on Anime Debate. We talk anime, we debate anime, we review anime, and this week, like I said, we're putting two shows in the ground. One of the best anime of all time according to popular opinion. Dragon Ball Z versus its sequel series, Dragon Ball Super. I'm gonna give you guys a story. I'm gonna give you guys my opinion of the music, the plot, the animation, the art, the characters, and the fights. And finally, at the very end, give you my verdict of which show I think is actually better. Now, if you like my opinion, if you don't like my opinion, I don't really care. Please leave a comment down below stating how you feel about both of these shows and which one you think reigns supreme. Now with that said, let's get started. Alright, so the story. Let's just start with Dragon Ball Z because it's simple. Dragon Ball Z is a story of Goku who finds out that he's an alien and he fights. And then more aliens come down from his motherland and they fight. And then more things happen and they fight, and then Goku actually gets a call back from his childhood of destroying an army, in which that army became obsessed with him, and one of the doctors in that army created actual androids to come back and fight. And then there is a mystical being who wants to come down and fight, and that's the show. I mean, it's all about the fights. Fight. Now, in the very beginning of the series, which is called Dragon Ball, it was more about adventure and you know, learning and growing and maybe even at times a bit of comedy. But this show takes itself entirely seriously for pretty much most of it. Like it really does take itself serious for the majority of the series. And it's kind of weird because the original series, Dragon Ball, was a lot more, you know, loose, and they had more fun, and they told jokes, and they were like little breaks for comedy. And I'm bringing this up because it's going to be poignant later. But really, Dragon Ball Z is almost always serious. There's a small, very small section for comedy, but most of this is a very serious fighting show, and you get into it, you're like, yeah, action. You know, there's a point where Vegeta, they call it, if you look on YouTube, Vegeta's Wrath, where Vegeta loses his mind and literally loses his eyeballs and just has like blood racing through the sides. He's like, ah! Like you don't get that stuff in Dragon Ball Super. You know, it was a different series for a different time. Now let's get over into the plot / story of Dragon Ball Super. So Dragon Ball Super is literally Dragon Ball Z, but let's say I don't know, a few years later after they defeat Cell. In this series, a lot of the fighters have retired from fighting. You have Gohan, who's now a dad, and Goku, who's basically a vegetable farmer, if you will, because that's the only way he knows how to make money, because he didn't go to school, because he's not very smart. Now, in this series, of course, the same thing happens. An alien comes down, and they have to fight, or something different comes down, they have to fight. I don't want to give too many spoilers if you haven't seen the series before. You know, it's to a different range now, though, because Goku is so powerful that the only thing left that can really defeat him on Earth is basically otherworldly beings. He's now reached Superman complex, where he can only fight things on a god level, and that's kind of what happens. Now, if you haven't seen this might be a minor spoiler, but there is literally a god that comes down to battle Goku. And then, of course, we get a resurrection of Frieza. These are both movies, and everything's spoiled by seeing the posters and even hearing the names of the movies, so I don't think I'm doing anything bad here. And basically what it does is the show retreads those movies, and then it finally gets into its own set of arcs, which, to be honest, are kind of disappointing and aren't very good in my opinion. But then all of a sudden, the show takes a whole turn by deciding to copy one of the arcs in Dragon Ball Z, in which, and this is a bit of a spoiler here, and I'm sorry for that, Trunks returns. And you're like, what? And the way that's handled is completely different from the way it was handled in the past. And I don't want to dig into that. But that will tell you, that the show does have more heart than it seemed. Now, one thing that people immediately said when the show started was that it just felt like a weaker version of Dragon Ball Z. And what the heck is with all this comedy? There's a point in one of the movies where Vegeta breaks character completely and sings a song about bingo and even protects his wife, which had apparently happened off screen. He got married to Bulma. It's weird because a lot of the characters take on these drastic changes that you just didn't expect. And yet, for me, being a fan of the original Dragon Ball, I actually really enjoyed it because this is what the show was. The show was a lot of comedy, a lot of action, and a little bit of story interwoven in between. But the issue we run into is that because you've watched like hundreds of episodes of Dragon Ball Z, if you're stepping into this, you're kind of like, what? Why are they making these really lame jokes? Why are they, not really seriously fighting right now? Why are even the fights being taken as laughs? You really do feel that way in the first set of arcs. And the fact is, that's just what the show is. I think Akira Toriyama and the producers wanted to go back to that old feel. Even with Dragon Ball GT, which everyone kind of hates, Dragon Ball GT tried to do that as well. And I think it succeeded, but people weren't ready for it, and that's why people universally hate it, because it's not as handled as seriously as Dragon Ball Z was. And so ultimately the story rounds out to them going into another tournament, and that's kind of where we are now. And to be real, I enjoy the story of both shows, but as far as really holding my attention for long periods of time, I have to give it to Dragon Ball Z. But I will say that the pacing is handled immaculately better over on the side of Super. Like, there were points in Dragon Ball Z where entire episodes would go on where nothing would happen. Like, literally, someone's powering up for like 10 minutes and then something happening over on the comedy side, then more powering up, then more comedy, then more powering up. And it's just like, are we ever going to get to this fight? And then you find out later that entire fight was taking over the course of 5 minutes, but it was really like 12 episodes, which I guess they're doing too in Super with the tournament arc currently. But I don't know, it's just kind of a bit of a weird way of, I guess, putting filler into the middle of this thing. And that's another thing too I'll say about both series, is that they both utilize filler, but Dragon Ball Super utilizes it immensely better. But even with that said, the story and the engagement and the way the characters build before everything becomes one-dimensional is just way better. Dragon Ball Z, in my opinion, would have been a better series had it ended after the Cell arc, but I think most people agree with that because Boo really was a retread of Cell in so many ways, but then with a little bit of a twist in there. That's just how I feel about it. Dragon Ball Super still has a lot left to do. There's a lot of rumors going on right now that Dragon Ball Super is going to end. I don't think it's going to end. I think it's going on hiatus, and it'll come back with new stories. But they have to do something drastically crazy to keep it interesting, because at this point, everything feels really simplistic and one-dimensional, as I said earlier. Now let's move into the other category, and that is music. I absolutely love music. Get it in, do the dance. Now, I'll be honest with you guys, not gonna live in the past too hard, but the original theme, Chala Head, of Dragon Ball Z is just gonna always be one of my favorite musical compositions of all time. Even the American dub version, Rock the Dragon, Dragon Ball Z, which we all grew up with. I grew up with it. I loved it. I dug it. That was amazing. And then you look over at Dragon Ball Super, and to be honest, I really like this theme music too. This theme music freaking rocks. And for some reason it gets stuck in my head. Not in the same way it did when I was a kid with Rock the Dragon, but I'm going to put the Japanese in comparison completely. I gotta say that I really do think this second theme in Dragon Ball Super is immensely better. Now, Chala Head, people might be going like, whoa, what do you mean it's better? You can't beat that Chala! You can't beat that Chala! What do you mean? I'm telling you right now, listen to them back to back, and you tell me which one is a better song composition-wise, even the writing, and it's just the way that everything goes. Not everything that's catchy is good, Britney Spears has a career for a reason, people, so just because you think something's really catchy doesn't mean it's better. So, for me, and I'll say this too, there are iconic moments and iconic things for every character being recycled in Super and updated a little bit from Z. And those updates make them better. There are moments we will remember forever because Dragon Ball Z is the classic series. That gives an unfair advantage when people think about it in their head canon. But the truth is, the music in Super is better. But I'm not a professional. It's just my opinion. Let's move on. Next, we've got animation / art style. Now, this is where things are going to get really semi-controversial. Like, just a little bit, just a tiny bit controversial. Because a lot of people know that the animation in Dragon Ball Super has some issues, but that's also in part because of nitpicky fans who were stopping frames to stare at like the little filler frames in between where Goku would look crazy all of a sudden. But to be fair, there were some episodes as well early on that did look totally freaking whack. But the thing people forget is that Dragon Ball Z had the same problem. Dragon Ball Z had a very similar problem. And to be honest, with both series, as I said at the very top of this review, both series has an issue with consistency. If you look at the character models and the characters at the very beginning of Dragon Ball Z, they look nothing like they do at the very end of Dragon Ball Z. Even during the fight transformations, I even think about the fact that it really just started to bug me when you look at the characters' faces, how, you know, Goku had a more rounder face, like rounder jawline, and he became very angular and sharp by the time you got to Frieza. And even with the muscles were super like roided out and out of control towards the very end of Z. And then over on the edge of, you know, the very edge of the beginning of the series, they were like actually natural muscles. They looked normal. I get it, you guys are getting stronger and bigger and whatnot, but it was just almost an over-exaggeration as to how much the characters changed as time went on. And it wasn't like a change of like, whoa, I just look different because I aged. They completely changed the way the characters looked from A to B. They couldn't even get down color schemes at first in Dragon Ball Z. Can we say that? Can we say that? Like, the color schemes of characters weren't consistent at first. If you look at the Super Saiyan hair when it first appeared to where it is later, is where it's just this really soft, wavy cloud-like material. They couldn't get that down. They couldn't figure out what that really looked like. Thing is, I just personally do enjoy the classic animation style better because I like those rougher edges. I like the hand-drawn lines. This like sharp, like glossy thing they do now in Super just isn't the same for me. It doesn't create the same dramatic tension. You know, when you see a shadow fall on someone's face a certain way, it means something. Like I mentioned in that rage moment for Vegeta, you're not gonna see anything animated like that in Dragon Ball Super. You're just not. Like, I get it that it's the modern way to do things. It's a faster way to do things. That's why they can put up episodes every week. But the thing is, it just loses a lot of its creativity and a lot of scene like a distortion, if it makes any sense. So with this, when I say scene distortion, I mean that because they were working on a smaller budget in Dragon Ball Z, they had to be more creative and to use different ways to distort scenes or have different ways to present the same information, including the way they fight. I remember in Dragon Ball Z, you get into battles and sometimes people were moving so fast that that you couldn't actually picture them with your mind's eye. So I always saw little puffs every here and there. They utilized that a little bit in Super, but not to the degree in which they did previously in Z. And to me, that just means that they're lacking something. Now, to get into the real idea of the controversy, though, is that people were like, well, are they spending any money on this show for Dragon Ball Super? Are they really going to spend any money? Because it looked like everything was really cheap and really rushed. And the thing is, if you're going to be that picky about the show, then you're not here for the storyline. You're here for the animation, and some people are here for that. But you shouldn't be here to watch anime, especially Dragon Ball Z, if you're not gonna get yourself invested in what's happening and if the fights aren't at your foreground. This is a shonen anime. It's all about the fights. It's about like getting things off, making them move real quick. Some of these fight scenes were kind of terrible. Let's be real here. But we've also had our bad fight scenes in Dragon Ball Z as well. Again, I mentioned the Frieza freaking fight where they didn't even fight really. They just kind of stood around for a long time and just talked. Like, I'm glad they're not getting that happening anymore, but that's not even an animation, quirk. But ultimately, I'm just gonna say that because I'm old, I don't know. I think the animation is better in Dragon Ball Z, although it is not consistent whatsoever. I just have to say that even with each change, I still enjoy that animation style. As you look at Dragon Ball Super, they are much more consistent. Even though they go off model every now and again, they are definitely holding to a particular way that each character looks, and they're not going to deviate from that slowly over time. Like, if a character is really big when they're in a certain form, they're going to be really big in that form always. They're not going to like shrink and grow and scale in different ways. It doesn't make any sense. But even though the animation isn't, it's not that classic feel. Like, honestly, I think if you could meld the two, if you could just hand draw Dragon Ball Super, I would give them the edge, because I do like how crisp the lines are. I do like how smooth everything looks. But at the same time, there's something to be said for just that like gritty, dirty feel for a show that's about fighting. If this show's about anything else other than fighting, I would definitely give it to Super. But because this show's about fighting, you want that dirtier, like grittier feel that the classic animation style gives you. Alright, let's move over to characters. Now the characters are almost the same, but they're handled differently, and this will also carry me into voice acting and whatnot, because I don't want to, gloss over that. So let's just do a straight up comparison. So I'll just use Vegeta, because Vegeta is my favorite character in Dragon Ball. Vegeta in the dub is laughably terrible. Like, I'm sorry, he's laughably terrible in Super, because it feels like the voice actor just kind of got lazy and just doesn't care anymore. If you don't know, the same voice actor that voice acts Vegeta also does Piccolo. And now that you know that, watch Dragon Ball Super. You will hear Piccolo's voice seep into Vegeta. Like you literally can hear the voices seeping into each other. It's like the voice actor just doesn't really care anymore about maintaining Vegeta's voice solidly or Piccolo's. And it's rough, because I love the voice actors in this show. But when you hear something like that, it's like, come on, man. Like, a few years ago, you were nailing this thing. Like, if you go back and listen to like classic episodes of Dragon Ball Z and hear the voice acting, it is beautiful. You hear that very distinct Vegeta voice, you hear that very distinct Piccolo voice, and you don't put them together. But now, because Vegeta's more animated and Vegeta has, a little bit more emotion in him, like where he goes, what? Like things like that. Like, he says these crazy lines that are kind of off character for him. But because he's older now and he's been able to domesticate it and he's been on Earth and he has friends now, I guess he's allowed to entirely change his personality. And I just don't know how I feel about that. I really don't. And maybe it's blasphemy to say that the voice acting is bad, but I just feel like I hear that in other actors too. I know they're all getting older, but when you hear the voice acting over on the side of the original Japanese track, everything still feels the same. Goku still sounds like the same woman he always was. Vegeta still sounds like the same guy he always was. Everything feels like it's consistent, like they're the same character. Like, I know they're doing slightly different animated, looks and takes, but the voices don't do these big jumps, and you don't feel characters bleeding into each other. Like you just don't get that over on that side of things. And this is all me just talking about Dragon Ball Super. Dragon Ball Super is being handled voice acting wise a little rough, and the characters are suffering because of it, and that is a problem on my end. And I know some people are saying, like, why are you comparing the dub and the sub and blah blah blah? Because that's what I watch. I watch both. I watch a combination of both things. So I'm using that information to formulate my opinion. Go figure. As far as characters go, Vegeta's changed a lot as a character, and it bugs me, because that's not who he was. That's not who his character is supposed to be. He feels like a little, like, petty, like childish guy, instead of being an immensely prideful Saiyan prince. They've really changed him in some ways that just doesn't work. It's played more for laughs than anything else, and I get it. He's not like the quintessential anti-hero anymore. He is just a hero. But that doesn't mean you have to lose who the character is on the inside. The same thing with Piccolo. Piccolo's now a glorified babysitter. He was that, towards the end of Piccolo, towards the end of Dragon Ball Z, but not to this degree. People like Yamcha are sidelined completely. There aren't really any new characters other than Beerus and Whis, and they're cool. They're played for a mixture of laughs and intensity, but more laughs than anything else. Like, I don't take either character seriously at all. But Dragon Ball Z had those characters like Yajirobe. So it's fair, but it's just a little bit more nuance within this show. Like, even with Frieza on Super. Frieza on Super is a completely different character than he was when he was on Z, which was a menacing villain. I know they brought him back to kind of help out, do some things, but even when he was a villain in that first Resurrection of F arc, I didn't take him as seriously as I did in his initial showings of Dragon Ball Z. Now, if I'm taking the characters of Dragon Ball Z, I feel like they took some time to really build these characters and give them some depth. They took some time to really build these characters and give them more development. Even Goku grew a little bit over time, and I get it with the time skip between Z and Super. You can say that Goku became more silly and took things less seriously, but I just don't know, because I feel like that jump isn't that different between the time skip. The time skip is maybe like 3 years, maybe 2. I forget how long it is. It's not that long. It's not that big of a time skip. It's not like 20 years went by and my whole personality changed. It feels like all these characters change, voices and personalities are just not even remotely the same. And they've also become more one-dimensional on the side of Super. Dragon Ball Z with Vegeta, you saw his arc and it made sense. You know, you saw where his pride had to be put aside for the greater good. You know, you saw where the villains had their motivations and where they came from. They didn't just show up to fight aimlessly, you know? Even, you know, Boo, who had this split dueling thing, they gave him a little bit of history. You know, I wanted to take a second and down all the way back to Dragon Ball the original. There was an episode in Dragon Ball the original where Goku time traveled, right? And got to see Master Roshi in his younger days and even interact with him. And that was super cool to get an idea of who Master Roshi was and where he came from. And that is a bridging point to Dragon Ball Z, where they did that same thing with several characters in the beginning. But towards the end, again, they hit this one-dimensional note that Dragon Ball Super takes with it and doesn't go beyond. Even the new characters they introduce in the great, you know, Universal Tournament arc, they get these building moments. They're not as effective as they were in Z. So for that reason, Dragon Ball Z is going to get the characters department, because honestly, you wouldn't love these characters if this is the first time you met them. If Super was the only thing you ever seen, you just be kind of like, oh, that guy's okay for almost everyone. Now fights. Now, Dragon Ball Z has some iconic fights. We all know that. These are some fights that people will literally take from the episode and put online or rewatch again and again and again. So is there any way that Super can top that? I'll actually say to you, yes. By creating new dynamics and ideas like Hit and his ability to slowly slow down time and actually get at you, from here to there, to there to here, and you haven't found out a way to break that. That is incredible. Things like introducing new power levels that actually give you a new transformation that actually makes sense, like your body taking over and giving you pure instinct. That is amazing to me, and that creates more tension in the fights. You don't get these moments that are as brash as to, I can't see anything that's happening, or just a bunch of punching and then repeating the same animation again and again and again. Dragon Ball Super, as it went on, got better and better and better as far as the fights went. Now, can I say the arcs are as iconic? No, I can't say that at all. I really can't. But I can say that my enjoyment of the fights and my what? Oh my god moments are probably higher in Dragon Ball Super, especially in this last arc. I think they've tried to really outdo themselves in this current arc, and it shows. Everything from creating new transformations to people being, having a little twist here and there. I just think the way that they execute it and the way the fights go down, they make immensely more sense. But do they really have that same amount of tension? Do they have that same amount of build-up? No, they don't. And the build-up is kind of like, it's like foreplay before you have sex. You need the foreplay to really make it a satisfying experience. But once it actually starts happening, to be real, Dragon Ball Super executes at a higher level. Like every punch, every kick, you can see it, and it makes sense. Like when Vegeta goes to someone, it's not like it's like boom, gets launched off, gets up. You see the repercussions of them launching into these battles, and it just feels to me like a definite evolution, no pun intended. So for this one, Dragon Ball Super wins the anime debate on fights. Now, I need to make my final deliberations, but I need to just take a quick second to thank you guys all for watching. If you dig what I'm doing here, please give me a thumbs up and please subscribe to this channel and let me know what you want to see me review and compare next. Now let's get into the final deliberation. So we have Dragon Ball Super, the evolution of sorts of Dragon Ball Z, one of the most iconic shonen anime of all time. And you want me to tell you which one is better. You want me to tell you which one reigns supreme. The fact is that Dragon Ball Z is a part of my childhood. Dragon Ball Z helped make me into the man that you see before you. This is not my real hair, for the record. Dragon Ball Z formulated a lot of my art style growing up. When you were a kid, you sketched everything. When I first saw Dragon Ball Z, I started making all my men with muscles, So this show means a lot to me. I identify with Vegeta being someone who fell short but still had a lot of aspirations. I can understand, the plight of even being Piccolo, someone who's somewhat of a fallen god, and then being surrounded by gods that he can't compete with in terms of Super. That's gotta be hard to deal with. So I can relate to both of these shows in very vastly different ways. But ultimately, the fact is that when Dragon Ball Super came out, I was super excited. And I was expecting a lot. I was expecting them to take us on new adventures and new journeys and new, crazy, awesome adventures on a global scale. But it just feels like they're retreading a lot of what made Dragon Ball Z great, and often failing to capitalize on those moments in a strong fashion. They've definitely taken a moment to, give the show more comedy, give the show more lightheartedness, and I appreciate that because I'm a fan of the original Dragon Ball as well. But at the same time, I just don't get those same feels when I watch Dragon Ball Super as I had with Z. But at the same time, I also rewatched Dragon Ball Z repeatedly. I mean, like, this is before I had access to subtitle anime, and I had to rewatch the same dub episodes again and again and again and again and again and again and again. The fact is that if we're going to do a comparison, you have to compare the arcs head to head. And you have to also know that Dragon Ball Z should have really ended with the Cell arc. The Boo was tacked on and didn't need to happen, but they did because of money, It is what it is, man. It is. But if I have to put my finger on it, I mean, there is just less to hate about Dragon Ball Z. There's less to gripe about. But we're also living in a new age. We also live in a new world where the internet is here to kind of like alter our ideas and really shape how we formulate concepts. One show has great animation. One show has great storytelling. One show has great characters. One show has amazing music. So which show pulled it all together? Dragon Ball Super, I'm glad you tried. But I have to ask you to come back and try again. Because Dragon Ball Z wins this anime debate. If you agree with me, let me know down below by using the word balls in your comment. If you don't agree with me, use the word balls with a Z in your comment. And please let me know what I could have done better here on this show. And let me know what you want to see me debate next on the next anime debate. And if you didn't see the last one, go check out my Devilman versus Devilman video.